There are these surveys that they've done where they looked at what would make you go or not go on a second date. Men named 3 things. Women named 300 things.
Holy
right? And that's the problem. The number one factor that you should avoid when looking for a partner is
It is insane, but the rates of single women and failed relationships are skyrocketing. So the question I have is, should we actually start settling for Mr. Good Enough or keep our standards freaking high and potentially risk never finding anyone?
I want people to have very high standards, but about the things that matter. And I want them to kind of let go a little bit about the things that don't matter. So what I found is that what a lot of women do is they go on a first date, for example, and they say, yeah, you know, I had a good enough time, but no chemistry, no butterflies, so I'm not going to see this person again. And they don't realize that sometimes, you know, I think they have this idea that you're going to have this intense chemistry the second you meet this person. And sometimes that happens, but sometimes it doesn't. And they feel like, well, I have these expectations that it's going to be this incredible script that I have written in my head. It doesn't always go that way. You know, if you had a good enough time, go again and just spend another hour with this person and see what it's like. So many people who do that say, wow, the second time it was so much more fun. I felt all these things that I didn't feel the first time. I really got to know this person more. This person got to know me more. So I think that it's not settling to go on a second date with someone if you had a good enough time. Like if it was like a 6, go again. That's not settling.
I love that so much. And the idea of we perceive it as settling versus giving something another chance is very mixed emotions. And I think that it then doesn't allow us to then assess whether they're right for us or not. So if you had to, like you even just said, like if there are 6 on date 1, go on a second date. What other things would you look at on that first date to determine whether you go on that second date? And then I'd love to then go on the second date to determine the third.
Yeah, well, first of all, I should say, like there are these surveys that they've done where they looked at, you know, what would make you go or not go on a second date. So first of all, men named 3 things. They said she has to be cute enough. And by the way, unlike what people think about men, they just meant she has to be like cute to me. She doesn't have to look like Angelina Jolie. She just has to be like cute to me. And about the baseline, like she's someone who is relatively attractive, but not supermodel. She has to be kind, and she has to be someone that I feel like we have sort of something in common, right? That person gets a second date. 3 things. Women named 300 things in surveys. They had 300 things that would prevent them from going on a second date. And they included things like he ordered tap water instead of sparkling water. You don't know anything about what that means or why that person did that. Maybe they wanted to appear easygoing. Maybe they don't care about that thing. You know, these kinds of things. Or, you know, someone said, oh, he did this impression of someone from a movie and it was really cringy. Well, maybe he was nervous and he was trying to impress you. And on a second date, he doesn't do anything like that. You know, I just think that you have to realize there's another human being there. It's not like you're shopping. It's like there's a human and you want to see, how do I feel when I am with this person? And that's all you need to know. Do I feel like, oh, maybe I'd spend another hour with this person and get to know them better?
So why is there a difference between the men and then the women and basically on our want list?
I think the difference is that women are sort of natural storytellers. So we come up with this story in our head about how it's supposed to go when we meet the person that's going to be the right person. And men are more sort of, I mean, these are gross generalizations,
course,
but as a therapist, this is what I see. I see that men are sort of more like in the moment and present. They're not futurizing so much. They're like, how did I feel about this person on this date? Oh, I'd like to see her again. I don't know yet how I feel about her, but let's see. Let me see her again. Women are like, oh, wait, I don't see this going anywhere. I don't see this as the person that I'm going to spend my life with, so I'm not going to waste time seeing them again. So we've told a whole story about whether or not they're right for us. Because we fill in all the stories about, what we think it's supposed to be like. And what's interesting is that when they've done studies of people, if they follow them longitudinally, I found this study so interesting. If they follow people starting from the first date and then they follow them every 5 years for 20 years. And what they found was that people who were together from that first date to 20 years later and were happy did not remember correctly that first date. So at the time, they might have said like, yeah, it was fine, whatever, nothing great. But they went on a second date. 20 years later, they said, oh, I knew right away that this was the person, right? So the story has changed in their mind. But people who were either, say, together 20 years later, but unhappy, who at the time said, oh, we had amazing chemistry, would say things like, oh, I knew early on that we were not right for each other and I should have listened to myself, right? So they've changed the story in the reverse. So it's really interesting how much we can be storytellers and how much we can be unreliable narrators of our own lives based on the story that we're trying to fit into at the time. So I say, let's let go of that story and just stay in the moment and say, what do I think of this person right now? Do I want to spend another hour with this person to see more and get more information?
Okay, so that's super powerful, but then how do you start to actually do that then? If you're the person that maybe is listening right now and they're like, oh yeah, I am that person that totally judged the guy because they ordered tap water instead of bottled water. How do you start to unwire the beliefs that you have in the type of person that you think you're going to be with?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I should say none of us think that we're that person.
Oh.
So
you said
so no one at home is no judgment here at all. It's really so much about like what the culture has taught us about what things are supposed to be like. So none of us think they would say, oh, I wouldn't not go on a second date because somebody ordered tap water, but you'd have another reason that's similar, and you don't realize it. So I think that it's important also in this culture of app dating, everybody's using the apps and everybody thinks there are so many people that you could go on a date with because you can swipe and have a date 2 hours later. That's how it goes. So people think that there is so much opportunity for someone, quote unquote, better, that they really don't give anything a chance. And if you look at things like, behavioral economists, for example, there's a book called The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. And it's about how if you have too much choice, that actually it makes it harder. We think it's a great thing to have a lot of choice, but you want to have just the right amount of choice. So you don't want to be like in a fishbowl where there's like one fish in the bowl and that's your only choice. That's too constraining. But you don't want to be in the ocean where there's like a million fish, but you can't really connect with any of them. You want to have like an aquarium where it's just the right size, where there are some choice, but not too much choice where you're just like swimming and swimming and swimming and swimming and not connecting, or you're like stuck in this fishbowl with someone that maybe you don't actually connect with. So what he was saying was, here's a metaphor. Say you are looking for a sweater and you go into a store and you know what your criteria are. So you have high standards. Your standards are, it has to fit me a certain way, it has to be this color, it has to be this material, and it has to be within this price range. You have really valid criteria. Let's say the first store or the second store, and you find it. And you're like, this is perfect, this is great. Let me hide it under the other sweaters so that I can go look at a few other stores to see if I find something on sale or something that slightly fits me a little bit differently or slightly a different color, whatever it is. And say you find something that meets, like, and we're talking about by a hair, another standard. And then you finally get that, you're less satisfied with that because of all the energy that you spent trying to find that thing. And you feel like, well, it has to be perfect now because of all the energy that I spent. Whereas with the first one, you're like, I found it, it's great, I'm happy, I get lots of compliments on it. I don't even second guess that. I'm not looking over my shoulder for something else. The person who is the maximizer, so the first person's a satisficer, which doesn't mean you're settling. It means you are satisfied with the high standards. A maximizer is never satisfied. They're always looking over their shoulder for something better. So even when they find the sweater that is slightly better in whatever criterion, they still are looking over their shoulder. We do that with dating so much because of the way the culture has taught us, hey, you can just go on the app and you can look at all these other people. So if you only felt like a 6 with this person, go back on the app. You might feel like an 8 with this other person. Whereas if you just went on another date with the 6, maybe you'd feel like an 8 the next time, and maybe you'd feel like a 10 the time after.
That's so powerful. And as you were talking with that shopping analogy, I was just thinking in real time about how you know when you actually go shopping as a woman and you say, you're actually looking for something. So you've got an event and so you're looking for a dress. Like you said, you've got it in your head. It's so hard to find. But do you ever go shopping where you're like, I'm just browsing, I'm not really not look. And then that's when you end up finding like the piece de resistance of the clothes that you then wear for like ever. Is that part of it? Like in the sense of like, if you don't have any expectations, if something comes across your path, you're more likely to be pleasantly surprised versus having high expectations, that person coming across your path, and now you kind of compare between what you're looking for and what's in front of you.
Yes. So many times people say, I married somebody who was not at all my type.
Me.
And this person has become my type. But I think you have to have certain expectations in place. So you can't have no expectations. You have to have really high expectations about what study after study shows matter for a long-term, happy, fulfilling relationship. And those are the character qualities. Is this person reliable? Is this person truthful? Is this person someone who has your back? Do your values align? That's incredibly important. Is this person emotionally generous? And most importantly, is this person emotionally mature? So sometimes these people who are very charming and they kind of love bomb you and it feels really great, they do not understand relationship. They know how to seduce someone, but they don't know how to be with someone. They don't know how to love and be loved. They do not understand the relationality, the reciprocity, the sacrifices we have to make. They just don't understand it. And so sometimes people really fall for that. They say, that's my type. And then they're like, but why is this person, now acting this way toward me? And that's because we marry our unfinished business. And what I mean by that is that so many times, and you can see, and maybe you should talk to someone, there's a client that I have, she's in her 20s, and she keeps dating men who are going to disappoint her, men who seem great at the beginning. And then she's like, well, why do they drink too much? Why are they yelling at me? Why are they inflexible, right? And that's because this is what she grew up with. She grew up with a father who was very loving when he was there and then very unreliable when he wasn't. A mother who was very depressed, so very unavailable when she was depressed, and then very available when she wasn't. When we see someone like that, we think, oh, I'm never going to be with someone like that. Right? I need to find someone who's the opposite of the ways in which I was hurt when I was younger. But what we end up doing is our subconscious says, oh, you look familiar, come closer. And we don't even know that. This is completely outside of our awareness because we haven't processed that. If you've done the work in therapy, you start to not look for that anymore. But if you haven't done the work, you say, oh, this person seems so different. They're not going to hurt me in that way. But your subconscious says, oh, you look familiar, come closer so that I can win this time. This time, I'm going to master a situation in which I felt helpless when I was younger. And it never works out that way. You are not going to master the situation. You're simply going to get re-traumatized and re-hurt in the ways in which you were harmed as a child. So this is why it's so important for people to be really aware of what didn't work when they were younger. What did they get and what didn't they get? And how can you grieve what you didn't get so you're not looking for that from a partner without even realizing it?
Wow, I've never thought about that. That you look to master it. I always thought it was like from a place of comfort. It's like, oh, to your point, right? The familiarity.
Yes.
There's comfort in familiarity, even if it's not healthy for you. But I never thought about it. It's like now you can you feel like maybe I can fix it this time, and you probably end up not being able to fix that problem, and it just repeats itself. And I want to go actually back to something that you had said earlier about the things that women look for versus what men look for. You actually break down in your book where you talk about how there's different categories that are more important to a man versus a woman, and then vice versa. So you go through the physical appearance. So talk to me about the importance of physical appearance for a man versus a woman.
Well, I think physical appearance is important for both. I think that you have to be physically attracted to your partner. So everybody who says, oh, you can learn to, be attracted to them, I say no. But what I mean by that is sometimes people will be friends for a very long time, and then all of a sudden they're connecting differently, and all of a sudden they find each other attractive in a way that they hadn't before. So in that sense, it can grow. But generally, it's not like I would ever say to somebody, oh, you're not attracted to this person, try to be attracted to them. No, absolutely not. I just think that the difference is that women tend to, in the beginning, be more holistic around what is the experience like with this person. And men in the very beginning, I'm talking about like the first few dates. Men in the beginning are going to be more focused on the physical, but the other things are important. They're not going to continue the relationship if the other things aren't there.
So it isn't just enough in and of itself to be attracted to the person.
No, it won't. I mean, that's where all the people who come to couples therapy and they say, we were so attracted to each other in the beginning. We had this amazing chemistry. And I'll say, well, what else was going on between the two of you? And they look at each other and they realize we didn't really have any deep connection. We didn't have trust. We didn't have disclosure. We didn't have vulnerability. We didn't really understand the other person's operating instructions. It's kind of like the owner's manual when you get like a new appliance or a new car or something and you kind of have to understand how it works. You need to know that about your partner because they're going to be different from your other partners. What are some of the things that they're sensitive about? What are some of the things, what are their strengths? What are their challenges? How can you be supportive? Knowing that, and how can they do that for you? A lot of times couples don't know anything about that if they're just focused on that initial high of, the chemistry in the beginning. So chemistry is important, but chemistry has to be holistic. And sometimes chemistry can be unhealthy in the sense of the chemistry is that thing from the past that I was just talking about that draws you to this person so strongly. You have this strong visceral reaction, oh, that person. And that might be this unhealthy place drawing you to them as opposed to this healthy chemistry that comes more holistically.
For me, when I was much younger in my 20s, I was so insecure that I was looking for a really, really handsome guy to validate me because then it's like, well, he's so handsome. Other women find him handsome. If he's with me, then that means I'm special. So that was definitely my North Star back then. And then when I met my husband, I was extremely attracted to him. But that was when I started to realize it has to be more than that because I'm very goal oriented. So thinking about what is your goal? If your goal is to be happily married for the rest of your life, to still have that sexual drive, to be into each other, emotionally, sexually, physically, all of that, of course you're going to change. Of course you're going to age. Things are going to happen in life, health conditions, kids, drama, death, etc. And so if you just think about that and you're just looking at the looks, well, of course, in 5-10 years, that isn't going to be there because there's so much that, comes with aging. And I think that can be beautiful. So that was when I started to realize that attractiveness, yes, the chemistry is important, but it isn't the thing that should dictate whether they're the one to be with or not.
Right. And I think what's interesting about what you said is this idea that you got validation from who you were with. And we see this in movies all the time. I mean, look at romantic comedies that we watch. It's you complete me. And I think that on the one hand, there's an important difference here is that the person that you decide to partner with for the rest of your life, that is the most important decision you can make in your life. It's more important than really any other decision. So, but that doesn't mean that person completes you. You have to be a complete person, and that person has to be a complete person, and together it's additive. And that's an important distinction.
Okay, financial stability. So how important is it for a man versus a woman to look for that in a dating partner?
That's a really interesting question and so culturally dictated. I think that financial stability is, let's define it first of all. Financial stability can be how much are you earning, but it can also be how responsible are you when we look at our finances together. So whoever is earning the money, is the other person on board? Are you both on board? Do you have the same values around what your goals are financially, what you want, what lifestyle you want? And so that's more important than sort of who's making the money or where the money is coming from, is given our goals, how are we as a team going to do this? And sometimes you decide, it's going to be one person who's bringing in the money. Sometimes you decide it's going to be at different times a different person bringing in the money, depending on who you're focusing on at that time and whose career you're focusing on. And sometimes it's going to be, this is the way we do it, and here's what I offer the partnership, and here's what you offer the partnership. But the main thing is, do we have the same goals about finances? And are we both capable of living up to our responsibilities to meet those goals? And a lot of people come to therapy before they're even married. And they talk about all of these things like, sex and whether they want children, and if they do, how many, and who's going to take care of them, and finances and in-laws and each other's families. Because once you're in the marriage, if you haven't talked about these things or don't know how to talk about them, it's much harder. So it's kind of like in the beginning of a relationship, it's like you put down cement, right? And at the beginning of a relationship, the cement is still wet. You can still talk about these things. You can still kind of mold how you want it to go. But it's kind of like if 5 years later, you say the cement is dry, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, I really want to do this financially. And the other person says, but that's not what we talked about. And now it's much harder because you might not agree.
Mm-hmm. But even before you get to that point, when you fill out like the dating requests, right? A lot of women will put the salary that they're looking for the guy to be earning is very high. I believe the men don't as much. I get that the dynamic of a man wants to provide from a traditional standpoint, a woman is looking for the guy to provide, or now women are more educated, we're earning more money, so we're looking for either equal or above. But how much is that potentially setting us all up for disaster if that's such a big criteria that we think we need, and we're not looking at the edges of that criteria?
Yeah. I mean, I think what money represents for a lot of people is safety and even love. You know, how much am I loved? How secure do I feel? How safe do I feel? We don't realize that money is a stand-in for so many emotions. So you can look at it as, oh, well, that, you know, we don't want to talk about it because that seems like it's not about inherently who the person is, but it's what the money that the person comes with represents. This person makes me feel safe. This person makes me feel secure. This person makes me feel loved. And you have to look at your own backstory. It could be that when you grew up, money was love. It was like, if you pleased your parents, they gave you a financial reward. If you got A's on your report card, you got a financial reward. And that was how you were told that you were loved. And so that's what you think it looks like when you're older. So you really have to examine, how do I think about money? What does it represent to me? What would happen if the setup that we have now changes? Because it very well could. Something could happen. That person might not have money. Something could happen to their career. So I think you have to really understand for both of you and be able to talk about it. What does money represent for each of us?
All right, so I've got some stats.
Okay.
All right, so this is based on men earnings and what women are looking for statistically. So to be appealing as the average 5'10" man, a 5'9" man had to make an extra $40,000 per year. $40,000 for a difference of an inch.
Yes.
And a 5'4" guy would have to make an equivalent of $229,000 to be seen as an equal to a 6 foot guy.
And it's so interesting because women will say, men hold us to such high standards in terms of our physical appearance, but what do we do with men with money and height? Two things, right? Like so many women will say, oh, the guy has to be this tall, or the guy has to make this much money. And it's so interesting because we don't want to be held to sort of external standards like that either. Like I can't, men can't help how tall they are. They are how tall they are. And men don't want to be loved for their money. They want to be loved for who they are. Same with women. We don't want to be loved for our appearance. We want someone to find us physically attractive. And we enjoy that, just as men want to be considered physically attractive, but not because there's, a few inches here or there on their height. But then you look at women look at Tina Fey, for example. And, her husband is, I don't know, he's, probably in the 5'4" category. And, this is not an issue, right? Because she's so secure in herself. I'm sure she makes a lot more money than he does. So shorter and more money. So I think that when you see happily married people who break the mold, it really helps us in our culture to say, what is really important to us? What do I want? Not just now, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, in this partner. If I really connect with this person, why should those things matter?
And I think you also say that for all the couples that talk in happily marriages, when they look back at what they were looking for when they were dating, it actually has nothing to do with what they now need in their marriage.
Exactly. When I see a couple, I'm looking at 3 different components. I'm looking at one person, the other person, and then as almost like another client is the marriage, right? The relationship. So you've got 3 things going on, and all 3 things change in the course of people's lives. People change, each person is going to grow and change in different ways, and then the relationship is going to grow and change in different ways. And so the number one factor, in fact, that you should avoid when looking for a partner is rigidity. And this has been when they look at like, what are the qualities in a partner that you want to look for flexibility, you want to avoid rigidity, you want to look for emotional stability, you want to avoid neuroticism. You don't want someone who's rigid and neurotic because that person is going to not be able to grow either themselves, let you grow, or grow in the marriage.
What does that then actually look like in a relationship?
Oh, they can't adjust to new circumstances, which, let's say you have children or somebody has a different career, they want to change careers, or some dynamic in the family changes, or someone becomes ill. Anything can change. So you want someone who can really be able to problem solve with you and be on your team no matter what. I mean, I don't think any of us go into marriage and say, I want to be with someone who's really rigid and neurotic. And yet so many people choose people who are rigid and neurotic. So many times women will come into therapy and they'll say, oh, I love him so much. And I don't understand why he doesn't call when he says he will. And it just, that really, and I've talked to him about it and he doesn't seem to do that, but I love him so much and I don't understand. And they're sitting there like with the phone in therapy, like, why hasn't he called? And I say, is this how you want to live for the rest of your life? Waiting for the phone call? Waiting for them to call the next day when they said they were going to call this day, or wondering what excuse they're going to have, not really knowing what's happening, even if there's no infidelity going on, just the fact that they don't respect you enough when you've said, I need you to keep to your word. If you say you're going to call, then call. If you can't call, just text me and say, I ran into this issue, I'll call you tomorrow. Is that the person you want to be with? And they can't see that, oh, well, but I love all these other things about him. But this is a deal breaker. You are not going to be happy if this pattern continues, and it looks like it will. So are you signing up for this pattern? Or given all the other qualities that you like about this person, I would say give up some of the other qualities and choose the reliable person.
That's what I was going to ask. How do you know, like, it just seems like a sliding scale where it's like, okay, you hold on to this one thing that you really love about somebody, you're attracted to them or makes you feel good or whatever, and everything around it, you start to sacrifice or you start to give on. And I've heard this phrase recently of subtly settling, where it's not just acknowledgement of like, okay, I'm choosing to settle with this person because I've maybe looked out there, I've dated a bunch of people, and I realize I'd rather be with somebody that feels secure than to keep looking for somebody that may not exist.
But you can have both. You can have both. And I feel terrible for the person who not only feels like they settled, but the person who is being settled for. That doesn't seem like a great situation. And so I think a better way to think about it is to think about somebody, if we're going to use the word settling, which I don't love, but let's use the word compromise. Somebody is compromising to be with you. And we forget that because all of our girlfriends say, you go girl, you're amazing, you're the best, you deserve everything. And sure, and you can be a little bit difficult. You have your quirks, you have your family history, you have your moods, you have all the things that every other human has. But we don't think about somebody who's going to have to compromise in any way to be with us. Our friends tell us, you're the prize, right? And while, yes, you want to be confident, you also want to be realistic and say, and I'm human, and I can sometimes not be the prize. So if you make a list, like when you think about the list, I've sometimes had clients do this where, they'll make a list of everything that they want in a partner that they've decided, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And I say, I want you to make a list that's just as long about what somebody would have to do to compromise to be with you. And they might say something, it's kind of like in a job interview when they say like, what are your weaknesses? And you say, and you're trying to frame it as a strength, like, well, I work too hard.
Honestly, the amount of people that say, I'm a perfectionist.
Yes. I can't let my work go. So it's a strength sort of framed as a weakness. But But that's what people do. They say, well, I can be a little this, but it's really a strength because of this. No. What are the actual things that if your friends who know you well and were brave enough to say, here are some of the things that maybe somebody would have to put up with to be with you. What are some of those things? And if you really can get honest about that, then when you're with this other person, you don't think that you're settling. You think, oh, here are all these great qualities about this person. Here are some things that make them human. Here are all the great qualities about me. Here are the things that make me human. So you never feel like you're settling. You feel like, thank God this person is willing to put up with that about me.
I like the phrase, it just makes them human. Our friends are there to make us feel better a lot of the time. And so they're bigging us up. They're like, you don't need him, like ditch the loser. And it's like, okay, I love that. It feels empowering in the moment, but let's take the blinders off so that we can actually see who we are, all the mess that we bring to the table, so that we can actually just have more understanding that the other person does the same thing.
Yes. Well, so in maybe you should talk to someone. I talk about the difference between idiot compassion, which is what our friends do, and wise compassion, which is what we need to do and what you get in therapy. Yeah. So idiot compassion is, let's say your friend says, oh, I can't believe, I can't believe he broke up with me. And your friend says, what a loser. You dodged a bullet. You're so lucky. You deserve better. You go, girl. Right? But then you actually know that the reason that he broke up with her was because she was very needy, or she looked through his things, or she didn't trust him because she has trust issues, or whatever it might be. And you know this because it's kind of like if a fight breaks out in every bar you're going to, maybe it's you. We don't say that to our friends, but we've seen them through enough breakups. And maybe we know something about them because we love them so much, but we also know that they sometimes behave in this way. And so we've seen it happen a couple times, maybe 3 times. We need to, maybe not in that moment, but at some point help them to see that they're eminently lovable. And there's a thing that they do in a relationship that sometimes causes other people to react. And can we help them to see that so they don't do that in the next relationship? That's wise compassion. We hold up a mirror to them and we help them to see something about their role in the situation that maybe they haven't been willing or able to see. And so sometimes their picker is off. Sometimes actually they didn't do anything wrong. They just picked somebody who is not emotionally available. And that's been really frustrating. And so the person your friend tries to connect with them, and the person reacts poorly to that and breaks up with them. So they didn't really do anything wrong. They just picked wrong. Other times they do things in relationships that they're not aware of. For example, let's take this, he doesn't call when he says he will. There's a difference between that and, he was going to call me, or he was late, so I left. And it's maybe that he is having this big thing happen at work right now. And he was late, and you've been putting so much pressure on him, even though you know that he's having all this stuff happen at work right now, and you're still insisting that he come to this thing. So he's trying to do both. He's trying to please you, and he's trying to do his work. And so he was late, and you're furious that he was 30 minutes late. Well, normally that would be rude. But in this case, he's really struggling between, he's being pulled in these different directions, and maybe he didn't know how to communicate that. Can you be the one in the relationship to say, hey, I know you were late. What's going on? Can we talk about this? Right? But if you're not doing that, and then you're just getting mad at him for being late, he's probably going to break up with you at some point because he doesn't realize that, you have some flexibility. Again, rigidity, neuroticism. We don't want that. And, yes, he should have talked to you about it, but maybe you weren't able to hear him. Maybe you think, well, he's not prioritizing me. He prioritizes his work too much. And that's your own sensitivity because of the way you grew up. And you're not able to see that actually he does prioritize me, but right now this takes precedence. It needs to right now. And I need to be a little more understanding.
And so does that then come to you need to communicate it? Because where's that line between the settling, like, yeah, he's late, well, I guess I'm just going to have to deal with it.
You need to be able to communicate. And then you see, how does this person respond? But are you communicating by saying, I can't believe you're late. I don't like it when you're late. That's so disrespectful. That's not good. That's an accusation. So there's a difference between a complaint and a bid for connection. A complaint is what I just said. A bid for connection is, hey, you know what? I really like it when you can be on time because I don't like to sit there waiting, but I want to understand more about what's going on. Was that not the right time for us? Should we have scheduled it later because there was too much pressure? Do you feel comfortable telling me that you can't do something? If you feel like you're not going to make it on time, you say yes anyway, and then you're not on time. Let's talk about what's going on. I just want to understand.
Looking back in that story, I remember before I met my husband, I was going on a date with this guy, and he did text me and call me, hey, I'm running late, but he was over 2 hours. And on the 2 hour mark, I was like, he's like, I'm on my way. I was like, don't bother. Now,
was that a first date?
It was, yes, a first date.
Oh, uh-huh.
Part of me now thinks I probably should have just asked him if everything was okay versus just going, you're 2 hours late, screw you, I'm never going on a second date again. Because I definitely in that moment made it about me. He's disrespectful towards me, and so he's 2 hours late. Instead of actually me just communicating, hey, is there something going on that maybe I'm not aware of? Now, I did kind of know him, so it wasn't like a first date. I was meeting him for the first time.
First of all, let's talk about boundaries for a second, because it's not about, oh, you should have just asked him if he was okay. 2 hours is a very long time. You could have said after, when he said, oh, I'm going to be like 30 minutes late, and then he texts you again, no, I'm actually going to be an hour late. You could have said, if you didn't want to wait any longer, you could have said, you know what, it sounds like you have something going on. Are you okay? I don't have time to wait any longer. I have to be somewhere after, but let's reschedule, right? And I hope you're okay. Right? So you can set a boundary that I'm not going to wait that long, and let's reschedule. And then if it happened again, you say, oh, this person really isn't for me.
So I'd love to talk about the husband store that you wrote in one of your books, where you talk about a woman goes into a store, and the rule is that if they go up a floor, they can no longer go back down to another floor. Right. And each floor is an attribute to a partner that they're looking for. So the first floor is they're funny. You're like, well, I want something more than just funny. So you go to the second floor. Then funny and smart. You're like, well, I want a bit more than funny and smart. And so as the woman keeps going up in the store, we start getting to maybe the 8th floor where there's these 8 amazing attributes. They're wealthy, they're handsome, they're young, they're kind, they're funny, etc. Even at the 8th floor with all those attributes, we still think maybe there's something better out there. And so because we can't go back down, we go, oh, do we go up? And then yes, we just keep going up and up. And then I think it ends on something like you're on the 10th floor and you're like, and welcome to 73 million other women who end up being single on that floor. Because we just keep thinking that there's something better out there. Why do we do that? How does that become detrimental to us? And then what can we do instead? And I know that you don't like the word settling, but how do we think about that then in thinking, okay, these are all the wants that we have, but maybe I stop at floor 4.
I think it's more about checking in with yourself and asking, how do I feel when I'm with this person? All of the things that I was mentioning before, do our values align? Do we have the same ideas about what we want in life? Do we enjoy each other's company? Can we get through a hard conversation together? How do we compromise with each other when we both have needs? And how do we work that out together? These are all the things you have to do in marriage. People don't understand. They think that dating is a good test for marriage. I think a lot of dating is a lot of sort of fantasy, as opposed to, let me really look, they say, oh, it's very unromantic to talk about money and in-laws and children and, all these things. Well, no, it's very romantic, because if you're going to spend your life with this person, you want to really know who they are and what they're thinking about in terms of what they want in life. And does that align with who you are and what you want in life? And people think, well, we don't want to think about anything that's practical because that's, it's just a feeling. Love is just a feeling. Yes, it is. And that type of sort of immediate feeling is going to morph and shift and have all kinds of different forms throughout your life. But what is it like with this person? How do I feel when I'm with this person? And so many times people will say, oh, I really want this. I want this person to ask me to marry him, or I want this person to, whatever. And it's like, I'm always on edge with this person. Why do you want this person that you're always on edge with and you never know where you stand? And you're always worried about, am I pretty enough? Am I this enough? Am I good enough for this person? Is that who you want to marry? Is that how you want to feel? And they think, well, once we're married, I will feel secure because this person chose me. No, actually you won't. It will just continue. And in fact, you will up the ante. And so many people come to me later and say, I didn't realize that, these things were so important to my partner, that my husband valued these things so much. It's like, well, you knew that when you were dating. You just thought it would change when you were married. Don't ever think, what you see is what you get. Don't think it's going to change for the better.
Didn't you also say actually that men, when they date, they don't look to change the woman? They kind of just look at her and accept her as a woman when they date.
Yes. So that's another thing that, when they've done these surveys, they find that men they understand. It's like, when we talk about like ordering, you can't order your partner a la carte. It's like, it's like there are no substitutions. Yeah. I'll take this person, but with a little more height and a little more income. No, you don't. That's, they are what they are. And men don't tend to do the a la carte thing. Like, I'll take this person, but, let's substitute out this quality for this quality or this attribute for this attribute. They know that they're going to be with the person that they're with. And a lot of women think, well, I don't really like this quality, but I will change it. I have the power to change it. Really? How? I mean, I wish we all had that power to change other people. You don't have that power to change another person. You can't change another person. And when people come into couples therapy, usually it's why are they coming in? They want something to change. What do they want to change? You, right? The person sitting next to them. I want to change you. I want to change the other person. Well, what you want to change about them is what you knew about them when you married them. And that's the problem.
Yeah, when I met my husband, I definitely was like, okay, I need to change his outfits, his clothes, his fashion sense. And I mean, now that we've been married for almost 22 years, it's like, I couldn't care less. I find him extremely handsome. He can wear whatever he likes. And I'm just attracted to him because we have so much connection. We have so much history. We've got so much in common. And so to your point of like, we try to change them and then we're then shocked if we can't change them. Also, I want to go back to something actually you said that goes to a stat that I also pulled. So you saying about how if we, in the dating phase, if we date a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily set you up for, in fact, how did you phrase it? It wasn't like it doesn't set you up for marriage.
Right. So there's this great researcher. Her name is Meg Jay, and she did a TED Talk about our 20s. And she was saying, we have this misperception that, your 20s are your time to have fun. And you date. And then like, say you want to be married around 30, right? That all of a sudden then you're ready to meet the person. No, you're not, is what she's saying. And I agree with this based on what I see as a therapist, is that what happens is you don't know how to be in relationship. Because everything feels so temporary in your 20s. You didn't actually get to, you need to practice, but practice relationship, not practice dating. They're two very different things. Dating is one thing, relationships are another thing. And so you have to date to find a relationship, but can you stay in a relationship and learn something about yourself from those relationships? So many people say, yeah, I'm dating this person. I would never marry this person, but I'm having fun now. No. That's not the person. They're like, I'm in a relationship. No, you're not in a relationship with someone that you see yourself marrying. So why are you in that? You should only date people that you think you might have a future with. Because even if you're not ready to have a future, you don't have to get married right now. You don't have to get married at 24, but learn to be in relationship with someone who's a viable partner for you.
Okay, so let's say you do that and you go from dating phase to, okay, let me be in a relationship to really figure them out. Within the stat that I found that you talk about, you said is more like the consequences for the maximizers that you had laid out earlier. But divorce rates of people who live together before marriage is 12% higher than those who didn't cohabitate before marriage. I was shocked by that. I thought surely that if you live with someone, you get to know who they are. Then you get to figure out, okay, is this someone I want to spend the rest of my life with? And then the answer, I assume, would be yes, if you've been with them for a while.
Right.
But the fact that your divorce rate is 12% higher, why is that?
Right. So living together, if you're not engaged, so if you're engaged and you're living together, that's different. But if you're living together as kind of a test, often what happens is you think, well, I can return it. Right? So again, going back to behavioral economists, they talk about how if you buy something and it's final sale, you are actually happier with it than if you buy something that you know you can return, because you're always thinking like, oh, I don't know if I like it enough to keep it. But if it's final sale, you convince yourself and you say, oh, I love it. I'm so glad. Look at the great price I got for this. I love this so much. And that's what you do is sort of mental gymnastics. We don't even know that we're doing it. It's completely outside of our awareness. And so the same thing when you're living with someone, it's like, oh, it's not a final sale. I can return it. And so then you start to see all these things that maybe you don't like so much because you're living with someone. And often, sometimes because of just, you feel like sunk costs. You feel like, well, I've been living with this person for so long, I guess we're going to get married. And then you get married, but then there are all these things that you didn't really like. You focused on those so much that when you get married, they tend to get magnified. When you have decided we're going to get married and then you live together, you're not like, I'm going to return this person. Like, they're not returnable. So then you go into the marriage and you're focused on all the qualities that you love about this person. And you're less focused on all the things that you thought about when you thought maybe I can return it, but oh, it's too late. I don't know if I'm past the time. Given just the momentum at this point, it'd be weird if we didn't get married, so we'll just get married. That's totally different. If you're engaged, you already decided you're getting married. You're not returning it.
That's so true. It never dawned on me. And even in my own marriage, the one thing me and my husband from day one said, okay, we agree that we're never even going to joke about divorce.
Yes.
We don't say the word in the house. We treat it like the D word, like Voldemort. It does not get mentioned. And it never dawned on me in thinking through that that's kind of what you're saying, where because for us, there was no test drive. It's like, no, this is it. And so if something starts to go wrong, we've got to figure out how to fix it. And I actually just had an analogy from another guest, and they said, assume like your house is on fire. If you consider divorce, it's like, okay, well, if your house is on fire and the windows are open, you grab your belongings, you run out the window, you jump out the window for safety. If all the windows and doors are closed and the house is on fire, you try to find a way to put out the fire.
Yes. I actually wrote a column. So I have this advice column, Dear Therapist, and somebody wrote in saying, whenever my husband and I get into an argument, one of us threatens divorce. Oh. And I wrote about exactly what you're talking about, like it cannot be the word that cannot be mentioned. Unless you actually have reflected on it. Like, it's never in the heat of the moment, we're getting divorced. That is not a healthy way to do it. It's like if you really have worked in couples therapy and you have found out that, we cannot solve this problem, that is different. But if you are just in the heat of the moment, okay, then I'm gonna leave if this, or we need to get divorced. That really, what you're doing is you want the other person to capitulate to what you want, and you also want them to prove their love to you, which is, really not healthy. To prove their love to you by saying, oh, please don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. And that's not a healthy way of solving a problem. Okay, I'll do it, so you don't leave. So really, it's a threat to get your way, but it doesn't help you guys build those problem-solving skills of, actually, this didn't have to escalate. This didn't have to get to a 10. The house didn't have to be set on fire. Like, this was really maybe like a 5. And if we could problem solve this, it could go down to like a 2. So this is something we don't learn. We don't learn how to do this. And again, we do what our parents did. We do what people around us did. If we didn't learn how to do this, we just do whatever we saw around us.
And I mean, as you were explaining it, I was thinking it is very much a manipulation tactic,
yes.
Right? It's the threat. And then thinking about other manipulation tactics, I've heard you talk about crying with women.
Yeah.
And how, if a woman cries in front of, let's just say, a guy or their partner, how that can actually be a form of manipulation. Why do we do that? I mean, I assume it's to get our way, but how does that serve us and not serve us?
Yeah. What I mean by that is there's sort of genuinely, when we cry, I hope that, our partners are there for us. What I'm talking about is sometimes what I see in couples therapy is that whenever a subject comes up, like a woman might say to her partner, I really want to hear your perspective. I really want to hear, how you think about this, how you feel about this, what's bothering you. And he brings it up because she has asked and they need to talk about it, but she actually doesn't want to hear it because she hears it as blame or criticism instead of him coming toward her, again, a bid for connection, saying, I want to talk about this thing that's bothering me in our marriage. And she does not want to hear it because she doesn't want to change. She doesn't want to do the work that she has to do on her end, because she wants things the way they are. So he starts to talk about it, and then she starts crying, but in a way that isn't authentic, crying in a way like, you're hurting me, I don't want to hear it. And so he will shut down because he doesn't want to hurt his partner. And he feels like, oh my gosh, I'm hurting her, so I'm not going to talk about it. So she gets her way, which is we never have to talk about this thing that she doesn't want to talk about. To be clear, I am not saying that every time a woman cries that she's manipulated. Yeah. What I'm saying is sometimes, and men do this too sometimes, like they'll get angry instead. So women will cry, men will get angry. And those are the two ways that people will avoid having a conversation about something that they need to talk about. And it's so manipulative. You know, it's like, well, you know my history and please don't talk about this. It's like, I'm not talking about your history right now, so let's get the ghosts out of the room. I'm talking about you and me and what happens between us. And so I, as a therapist, will call out at the time, like, this is what's happening right now, and he needs to be able to say this, or she needs to be able to say this.
The reason why I brought it up actually is because I grew up in a world where I remember seeing my mum crying. I thought, oh, crying actually, like, and she would hide it. So I thought, oh, okay, you have to hide your feelings. And then I realized how it does impact other people when someone cries. And so when I first met my husband, I actually didn't cry around him, and I would always walk out the room because I thought I never want him to say he's sorry because I'm crying. I want him to say he's sorry because he actually is sorry for what he's done versus that he's sorry for hurting my feelings. And I was almost the reverse. After like a few years, he's just like, why do you not just cry in front of me? And I was like, I don't want to manipulate, you know, like, I'm almost like, I don't want to influence you. And he's like, but now it's almost like you don't feel safe in front of me. And so I had to almost like do the opposite.
Right.
Because of the power I think that we can have.
I think the difference is you weren't trying to shut down the conversation. So it's fine if you're crying and you're genuinely crying because you're hurt. And then to be able to say, you know, I'm really hurt because, and let's talk about this. That's a very different conversation than I don't want to talk about this.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to go back to something actually you said earlier about the sunk cost.
Yes.
How many couples have come to you saying, I knew it was over way sooner? And they spend another year, 2 years, 3 years trying to make it work. What's the difference between someone doing a sunk cost and then staying for longer than they should, let's say, or someone actually saying, no, I want to figure out how to get realigned and reinvigorate our relationship?
I think that so many times people act out of fear. And so they either stay out of fear or they leave out of fear. And so it can go both ways. That they either are fearful because they worry they're not going to meet someone else, or they're fearful, they leave because they think, oh, I will never be seen or heard in this relationship, without even trying, without even knowing what that might look like, because they don't know how to be vulnerable. And so I think it's really important that people, again, they need to learn how to talk to each other. People keep talking about communication, and what they get wrong about communication is not just like doing a dump of all of your feelings on the other person. That's not communicating. You know, communicating is really being aware of reading the other person as you're talking with them, being able to own what is yours and separate out what is theirs, and not blaming them for something. So you can say, hey, when this happened, this impacted me this way. I felt this way. That's very different from, I can't believe you did this. People will come into couples therapy and they'll say, we've tried to communicate about this so much. And I'll be like, let me hear you have the conversation right now. And they're basically yelling at each other, or they're insulting each other, or they're demeaning each other. And they think that that's communication. So we need to learn, well, what is communication? What does it actually look like? And what a relief it is to be able to do that with each other, and how safe you can feel with the other person when you bring your truth to the other person without making the other person feel bad, without blaming the other person, with just saying, this is my experience. Can we talk about this? With the other person not getting defensive and saying, well, I did that because. I don't really care why you did that right now. It's, oh, I didn't realize. Tell me more about what would have been helpful. And then let me tell you about my experience.
As a therapist, and when you're watching these couples go back and forth, when someone's retelling the story and they're both retelling a story and it ends up being very different.
Yeah.
How do you know, assume that maybe you don't have a therapist in the room to really be able to guide you, and you're just constantly arguing with your partner, and you have one side of your story and the partner has the other. How do you start to discuss that, be open to each other's sides, and actually realize the truth of what the story is versus being so damn dogmatic in your own position.
Yeah. So think about like a triangle, right? So up here at the top is the content. It's like we're fighting about whether we should, go to your friend's thing or what, whatever you're fighting about. And I don't like this friend and, whatever. That's up here. The process is down here, which is where the communication is. So the thing that you're fighting about at the top, if you keep talking about that, you will get literally nowhere. Okay? Because it's like, no, I feel this. No, I feel this. Well, then who's more important? Who loves who more? Whose feelings matter more? That's what's down here. So if you can say, you know what? I'm feeling like I want to make sure you understand that when I'm with this friend, this is what happens for me. And the other person can say, okay, how can we make it better for you? This is my best friend and it's important to me. Can we both compromise a little bit? Can you come for an hour instead of the whole time? Do you want me to help if this topic of conversation comes up? Do you want me to help redirect it? Like, how can we be there for each other in this situation? And then it doesn't become this binary thing of, yes, you're going, no, you're not going. I hate your friend. You don't support me because that's my best friend. It just becomes a completely different kind of conversation. How are we working together so that we both feel seen, heard, understood? And yeah, we're both not, like, in an ideal world, we would both want something different. But given that we're this partnership, how can we support each other and give something to the other person without giving up who we are?
And how much do we actually then stay in the feelings of things versus, I want to say, like, the facts of the situation?
Well, like what?
So, I feel like you were really rude to me and you really were disrespectful. So that's all feelings. The facts of it is your partner came up to you and was honest about you being messy. And so now you're just saying about your feelings that they really hurt you, but they're ignoring the facts of what your partner's trying to tell you.
Oh, so if you're the person who's messy, you might say you need to own the part that is yours, which is you are messy. So that's a fact. But what you can say is, I know that I'm messy, but the way that we're talking about it makes me feel shame. It makes me feel like something's wrong with me. It makes me feel like you're saying something in a way that doesn't feel respectful. So I know that this is something, I don't feel it's as big of a problem as you do. This is how I live. I know it bothers you. So can we talk about this in a way where it's not that being messy is bad or being neater is good, but that we're different, that I tend to not care that much about this. You care a lot about this. So let's talk about how we can work with this given that we live in the same space instead of being messy is bad and being neat is good.
It's so, because going back to that pyramid thing, you end up just arguing about the mess versus actually
like whose socks, who's this, who's that, and usually it will come, when you say someone's messy, they hear it as an insult.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like, this doesn't bother, maybe I'm more flexible than you are, right? Maybe I'm less rigid than you are. I mean, you could, but you don't even want to say that. That it's not about who's better. So many times in a relationship, it's a competition about like, who's better, who's more lovable, who's right. You got to get all that off the table.
The right thing, I think, is very important, that we all have base assumptions.
Yeah.
And so we look at the world based on our base assumptions. And so, for instance, if you think that, like I'm Greek, so being loud is actually seen as very good and it's, like accepted and it's welcomed. But someone like my husband comes from a place where no, being loud is disrespectful and if you're speaking over each other. And so just understanding that even if you're having the conversation about being loud, you come from different perspectives of how you perceive being loud to be.
Yes, and even when people talk about each other's families, they can be insulting. Like, that person is so loud, and it's like, well, no, I really like that. That's my culture. So again, it's having these conversations and learning how to communicate to each other what is important to you and why, and how do you work together. Always remembering that you're a team, and a lot of people feel like in this individualistic culture that we grew up in, that if I have to give up something in any way, shape, or form, that I am giving up my authenticity and my very being. No, you're not. You're learning how to be in relationship.
Okay, so as we're talking about relationships and dynamics and needs and wants and things like that, when I think about women, going from 20 years old to their 30s, to their 40s, to their 50s, to their 60s and 70s, I've heard you talk about the sweet spot in relationships with age. Now, talk to me about the sweet spot, the age, and then how, God, it's like, I don't want anyone out of a sweet spot to feel badly. So how do we start to navigate that? Even with the sweet spot, how do we make sure that we don't settle or compromise because we know it's the sweet spot?
I think the sweet spot more refers to there's not a specific age that is best to find your partner. It's more that if you have done relationships in your 20s, that people who tend to marry somewhere around 27, 28, 29 tend to, and this is just statistically, this is not to create panic because there are people who marry much later who do very well in marriage. But those people tend to do better. But I think the why is important so that people don't panic. The why is because those people tend to have not be looking over their shoulder, tend to have done the work, tend to have found someone they truly delight in and who delights in them. They tend to know how to love and be loved. And the people who are still dating much later often really didn't learn how to love and be loved. They picked the wrong people. They were the wrong people because they didn't know how to be in relationship. They were avoidant. They didn't have enough self-esteem. They had too much self-esteem. I mean, you name it. There are lots of reasons why they couldn't find the right partner. So it tends to be that those people, maybe they marry later, but maybe they still haven't learned. And so they're not as equipped as maybe somebody who married somewhere in that like 27, 28, 29 range. Marrying earlier is also sometimes not so good, right? Marrying like 24, 25, 22, 23, because you just don't necessarily have the life experience and you don't know enough about yourself. And maybe your partner doesn't know enough about himself either. So these are not rigid guidelines. They're just statistically, this is what people find. And I think it does have to do with how much work you do. So whatever age you're at, if you're doing the work now, that's great because you're putting yourself in a better position to find a partner who is going to be a healthy partner for you.
And do you see that as people get older, they do get more rigid and their wish list gets a little bigger because now you become a little more dogmatic in how you think and what you do and your hobbies and your lifestyle?
Well, there tends to be this idea that, I've waited this long, so this person has to be absolutely perfect, which is just not real. It doesn't really matter how long you've waited. If this is the person, this is the person. So it's not like, well, I've waited this long, so I should hold out for whatever. What are you holding out for if you met this person that you love being with and who, again, character qualities, reliability, honesty, same values, same ideas about lifestyle, those kinds of things that are really important in a long-term partnership. And I use the word partnership, even though it sounds really unromantic, because it is a partnership. Of course, there's like love and attraction and lust and all those things are there. But truly, you are a partner to this person going through life. And so many times, like, for example, people will come into couples therapy and someone will say, like, let's say someone says, like, he doesn't listen to me. And I'll say, well, how well do you listen to him? I hear a lot of like talking at him, but I don't hear a lot of when he tries to talk, you listening to him or vice versa, whichever partner that is. So many times it's like, are you a good partner? Are you a healthy partner? Are you the person? Who do you want to be in this relationship? Before I see people for couples, before they come in, because often if I just have them come in, again, they'll tell me what's wrong with their partner. I say, before you come in, I want you to send me a little note about what you want to do to be the best possible partner in this relationship, even if your partner doesn't change at all. What are the things you can do to make this better? And I ask that of both partners so that when they come in, I share that. So every time something happens in here, I'm going to remind you what your goal is. You're not about changing that person. I'm here to sort of help that person with their goals, and I'm here to help you with your goals. And if you both show up as the best possible partners, you guys are going to see that you don't have to change each other because you're going to change yourselves. You're each motivated to change yourselves to show up as the best possible partner. So there's no motivation to change the other person. You're working hard on changing yourselves. And that is so much more helpful.
God, I love that. And it's interesting how many people go to your your sessions wanting to change the other person and never really considers changing yourself in order so that you guys can actually have a great relationship. But I think sometimes the problem may come if one of you is willing and the other one's not.
I see more that both of you are willing, but you're insisting that the other person go first. If that person changes, then I will do this. And so I'm saying it doesn't matter who goes first. You're doing a dance together. Like everybody's doing a relational dance together. And if you can't change another person, but you can influence another person by changing your dance steps. So if you change something, that will influence the other person. Like let's say that you're kind of, you're very cold in the way that you deliver something that you're unhappy about. Let's say that you get warmer about that. Well, that person's going to receive it differently. You just changed your dance step. So they're going to maybe change their dance step and not respond in the negative way that they usually respond, but maybe they're going to respond with a little more warmth and flexibility. And now they're dancing differently with you. And now you're going to be a little more understanding. You're going to change your dance step, and then you're a little more understanding, and they're going to be a little more. So you're doing a whole new dance together before you even realize it. And it's small incremental changes. It's not, people come to couples therapy and they think we need a total rehaul of this particular issue. It's like, no, it's these little tiny changes that add up to a whole new dance in your relationship, not just around this issue, but now you're going to dance differently around any issue that comes up.
How much does that dance then change over the years, the longer you're with each other?
Oh, all the time. I mean, you've got to learn how to be flexible dancers with each other. And it comes from a place of kindness and understanding, and again, boundaries. That kindness and understanding don't mean you don't have standards or boundaries, but the boundaries are with yourself. They're not with the other person. It's not like, if you do this, sometimes we say like, you can't do this, that's my boundary. No, the boundary is, if you raise your voice, I'm going to end the conversation, and then we'll come back and talk about it later. I'm going to give you a kiss. I'm going to end the conversation, and we'll come back later. So partner raises his or her voice. You give them a kiss. You say, you know what? You raised your voice, but I really do want to talk about this. This isn't going to be productive. Let's talk about it in half an hour.
I love that.
And then you come back in half an hour, and that person, they know that if you do that every single time, if you only do it sometimes, so consistency is key. If you only do it sometimes, like let's say you do it even 90% of the time, doesn't work. Doesn't work. You're keeping a boundary with yourself. You're saying to yourself, I won't allow myself to be treated that way. So I am going to be very kind. I'm going to give the person a kiss, and then I'm going to leave, and we'll resume in half an hour. I'm going to do that every single time. If I break my boundary with myself and I let myself be treated this way, then it's on me. It's not that person's fault, because they see that I'm not going to hold the boundary, so they're just going to raise their voice. But if I hold myself to the boundary, and I respect myself enough to hold the boundary, then they're going to see that they have a choice. They can either keep raising their voice, in which case they'll never get to talk to me because I'm going to leave the conversation, or they're going to see that, they need to do something different so that we can solve this together.
God, the 90% not even making a difference,
No.
It's insane, but I want to know the truth. And I think that in those moments, sometimes we'll be like, well, they're having a rough day.
No.
Or, and then you'll start to negotiate your boundary a little.
But you're negotiating with yourself. You're compromising yourself, and you can say, that's okay that they're having a rough day. I understand that. So big kiss, big hug. Hey, it sounds like you're having a rough day. I don't want to deal with the raised voices. So I will be back. Do you want to talk in half an hour? You want to talk tomorrow? Like, make a time though, so it doesn't just get swept under the rug. Let me know when you want to talk. You can email me, text me, let me know when you want to talk, and we'll talk then. And I'm so sorry you're having a bad day. If you want to talk about your bad day, let's talk about that too.
Okay, I love how you broke that down. It's super practical. But when people are dating and they're looking for that love, the romance, the heart, they're not thinking about the practicality of it. So talk to me about the difference between romance and practicality.
Oh, but how romantic is that you can do this with someone? Do you know how vulnerable you have to be? Do you know how seen you are? Do you know how naked you are with a person when you do that? It's much easier to put on the mask and be like, I'm the cool girl. I can deal with this. It's okay. So many times people are like, I put up with this because, I don't want to be difficult, or I don't want him to think that I'm crazy. Right? Well, you're not crazy, but you can present it in a way that doesn't make him look at you as crazy. So, you're being so vulnerable. If you guys get naked with each other emotionally in that early dating stage, there's nothing sexier than that. That is, I think, what we all want. And then, by the way, physically, how sexy is that? Like when you know that like you can do anything with this person because they know you. I mean, do anything healthy with this person because they know you and they really see you and they see all sides of you and they love you anyway. Wow.
Do you think then it's like movies and society that has led us to thinking of romance in a different way? Because when you say it, where I'm like, oh, that actually does sound romantic and, very intimate. But I think that we've painted the brush of romance is, does he buy me flowers? Does he treat me to dinner? Does he, surprise me with things? How much has that then kind of warped our idea that that's what I don't even say warped, but that is what I think I was focusing on, at least when I first started going on dates.
Yeah.
It's like, how romantic are they?
Well, that's lovely. And there should be romance. You need that. You need to court each other. That needs to be there. So it's not one or the other. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make, is they think, well, I have to give up this other. No, you want the flowers and the romance and the courting. You want all that. That's fun, and it makes you feel desired, and it makes you desire the other person. That's really important. And by the way, you should do that even if you've been together for 20, 30, 40 years. That shouldn't go away. But the other stuff also needs to be there from very early on, and people think, well, that will come later. And that's a mistake. It needs to be there. I don't mean, by the way, that on a first date, you're telling your whole life story. So some people, there's TMI, and it's like, wait, what is happening here? No.
They say, I'm being vulnerable.
No, that's not vulnerability. Vulnerability is building trust over time. It's timing and dosage. So it's about, like you're going to get to know each other. You're going to tell them a little bit about yourself. They're going to tell you a little bit about themselves. And you're just going to see how you react to each other and how safe you feel and how well received you can, these things are. But it's little by little by little. So there are the people who never disclose because they think, well, I don't want to ruin this beautiful romantic thing we have. There are other people who think, oh, I'm going to be really vulnerable and intimate with this person. And they create false intimacy by saying, let me tell you all these things that happened in my life. And then you've told them all these things, but the other person doesn't quite know what to do with it. Or if this person is sort of has been hurt in similar ways to you, you feel this sort of trauma bond with them that is not healthy. So it's not about let's tell each other too much information. It's let's get to know each other both romantically and in this sort of emotionally intimate way, little by little by little, so that it builds and builds and builds. And that's really exciting.
I love that. Okay, I really want to talk about now women and us aging within dating and marriage.
Yes.
All right, so let's start with dating. I've heard you say that, what was it? A 20-year-old woman is equivalent to a 40-year-old guy. I think you said that, or I read it somewhere. But
what I was saying is that in terms of what our culture thinks of as appealing, 20-year-old women are obviously very appealing in a lot of ways in terms of their physicality. 40-year-old men tend to be very appealing in terms of their power. So how do we look at power in our culture? Power in our culture for women is changing, which is a good thing, has been about their physical, their beauty. Beauty is power for women. That's what it's been like. Success, financial success has been attractive, that kind of power for men. And we're seeing lots of changes in that, which is good. So I think what I was saying is that I think that some of that has been carried over, and that's not a good thing. That we need to like reevaluate what is power and how do we look at power in our relationships, and what does it look like to have equal power in a relationship, even though you get power differently. Like, it doesn't matter how you get your power. It could be that the woman has the money. It could be that the man brings his beauty, right? It could be that one of you has a great sense of humor and one of you is a real intellectual. It could be that one of you is really creative and one of you is really kind of practical. Whatever it is, but how do you bring power into the relationship?
So as we get older as women, our pool of selection does get smaller, whereas a guy's pool of selection, I assume, doesn't. Like, if they're getting older, if the society perceive them as more powerful as they get older, they can still date the 20-year-old, potentially, or the 50-year-old, because they have they have that space. Whereas as women, I think typically, our pool of selection of men does get smaller because it's less likely for us to date men that are younger.
Right. Well, I think that the reason that women don't tend to date men that are younger is because women tend to perceive power as sort of financial power. And younger men probably don't have as much financial power. The reason that men date younger is because they see power in women as physical beauty, and younger women they see as more physically beautiful. So that's just about that power dynamic. But when you talk about like who really is happy in their relationships, people tend to be happiest when there's equal power, or at least similar types of power. It's, again, they don't have to get their power from the same source, but that they feel like they're peers, they feel like they're equals. So in other words, we were talking about validation, how you got validation, right, from dating someone who was very attractive.
Yeah.
A lot of men who are divorced maybe don't have a lot of self-esteem at that time in their lives. They've come off of a divorce, and all of a sudden they're getting all this validation from women. And then they get into a relationship, maybe with someone younger, maybe not, but they get into a relationship with someone that they perceive to be powerful in terms of her beauty. And then what happens is they realize maybe over time that isn't necessarily what they want. And the same thing with women who will date a substantially older man because of his power, and they might start to realize, whoa, like we are very different in terms of what we want at this stage of life, what our goals are at this stage of life, what we talk about, the things we like to do. So there are some people for whom those big age differences work. But for a lot of people, they find that after the initial sort of burst of this gives me validation, that it's not really what they want in the long term.
Is that why then you say that sometimes couples will look, or women will look at somebody and go, oh, they're an 8. But the longer we're with them, it's like they start to slip into like being the 6?
First of all, I think that giving people numbers is just a shorthand. So obviously we don't give people numbers. But a lot of times what I'm talking about is that this maximizer mentality, when women are younger and they're looking and they say, this person's an 8 in their heads. They wouldn't use that number, but but maybe I can do better. As opposed to, wow, an 8 is great. And what we found in research is that men think an 8 is amazing. Like they're not like, maybe I can do better. So there are, again, these are generalities. There are some men who will be like that, but more women will say this person, they kind of feel like, but this, but this, but this, but this. And men, when they're younger, feel like, oh, I'm so lucky to get the 8. Now, that switches as they get older. As men get older, they feel like I have more power. So now I really want the 10. You see, so it kind of switches. Women have more power when they're younger, men have more power when they're older. Yeah. And that changes this sort of mating and dating dynamic.
How does our age play into dynamics within a relationship then? So I'm 44, so I'm about to go into perimenopause. I'm already noticing the differences. And so to hear that, I think as women go into menopause, the rate of divorce skyrockets, and it's actually more initiated by women.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, divorce in general is more initiated by women. So women initiate divorce more than men across the age range.
Why is that?
Well, I think women have to deal with a lot. And so I think what happens is in marriage, it has often been an unfair bargain for women. Women were expected to take care of everything at home, in addition to now if they want to have a career, and then they're doing all of the emotional labor of sort of running the household. So if they have kids, like, it's not the dad often who's going like, oh, who is where and who's on this play date and when's the teacher conference and all this, even though the dad will often say, well, I would totally go to the teacher conference or I would totally drive to the play date. It's like, but you didn't think of it. I have to like do all the logistics in my head. And so a lot of times that's a big problem in marriages where men are not, they're doing much more than they did before, but they're not doing kind of the emotional labor. And so at a certain point, so when the kids are grown, let's say, women say, you know what, I'm a little bit tired of this imbalance and I don't want to do it anymore. And that's why I think at that point, when the kids are out of the house, that women are saying, I want something different for myself. Now, if they're married to somebody who they can communicate with and who is willing to talk about what's not working, a lot of people really do want to stay with their partner. But sometimes people realize, you know what, I wasn't with the right partner. So that's part of it too. It's like I stayed for all these reasons and now I have the freedom. And there's something incredibly liberating about saying, I don't want to spend the rest of my life with this person who I don't think is right for me. Good person, not for me. The kids are grown and launched, and life has a 100% mortality rate, and I want to be able to make different choices.
Yeah, it really does break my heart to think that we get, whether it's more brave or more clarity as we get older, that hang on a minute, I need to start living for myself. Instead of giving it over to the family and everything else. And I've been very aware of that. And that's something I'm wanting to try and talk about more. So I think that we can hopefully start to talk about it more so that we start to recognize in our early years and we don't wait till we get to our late 40s and 50s where now that we're making a pivot. And let's face it, we may have, don't want to assume, but we may have less energy, less, adventurousness in us to go and actually seek out the things that we've always wanted to do, but never done it because we've always sacrifice for the sake of the family.
Right. And that's why you need to have a good picker when you're young, because you want someone who, however you want to do your household, you want to make sure that that person is on board with it and that they are not on board just in word, but in action. And you can see that when you're dating too.
Yeah. I've got some other stats that I would just love to go through with you. So there are 28 million single women over 35 compared to only 18 million single men. Between the age of 30 and 34 years old, there's 107 single men for every 100 single women. But by the time you get to 45 to 65 years old, there's only 72 single men for every 100 single women. What is going on?
So men tend to benefit more from marriage than women, or at least in the old model of marriage. So again, women are the ones who are leaving, not men. In the generation even before ours, women needed to have a reason to, it had to be infidelity or abuse or, whatever it was. And even then, you had to prove it, right? So you couldn't just leave a marriage because this isn't the right marriage. You couldn't just leave. And so, once there became no-fault divorce, not that divorce is easy for anyone, but it became an option. And so I think a lot of women started saying, you know what, I'm going to leave. And what happens to the men is the women might say, I don't necessarily want to remarry right away because this is what marriage was like for me. And the men are like, I need a wife. And so they tend to get married very quickly thereafter.
That makes complete sense. 75% of women in their 20s have a list of non-negotiable qualities for their ideal partner that are often based on romanticized and unrealistic standards.
So women are having these idealistic sort of, what we talked about earlier of they didn't order tap water, or they ordered tap water, or they, did this, or this happened on first date, whatever. What's also happening though is that relationships are basically like, you're on the apps, you text each other, you maybe finally go on a date, somebody ghosts somebody. Like there's just no sort of respect, manners, any of that. And men tend to sort of take advantage of this system. And so they'll be dating multiple people you don't really know, they're not really invested in exploring one person. This happens very often. So this isn't obviously all people who are looking for a partner, but it's just sort of the culture that they're growing up in. So yes, women have had these unrealistic standards, but I also think that women need to hold on to their standards because they should not let men treat them the way that a lot of these men who are on the apps are treating them. And they feel like, well, that's how all the men are nowadays, so what choice do I have? Well, you do have a choice because it's not every single man.
Amen, sister. And that was actually one thing that I'm trying to talk a lot about as well, is that I've got incredible female friends who are single, and I've got guys that are saying there's no decent women out there. It's like, well, that's not true because I've got a couple of friends that are amazing. So, you know, obviously selection very much matters, but I definitely feel sorry for people out there. But actually, maybe I'll start an app. I keep telling my husband that we should start a dating app for growth mindset people that aren't based on just the looks.
Yes.
Okay. By age 40, only 10% of college-educated women who have never been married will get married.
It's very hard to find a partner in midlife because most of the men who wanted to get married got married, who are the people who are good partners, who want contented domesticity, you know, who want what these women are looking for. They're married to other people at that point. So you have a very small dating pool there are lots of men out there, but a lot of them are men who don't know how to be in a relationship, are emotionally immature, are, as we said, neurotic. They don't necessarily want what you want. Let's say that you want children, you want a family. They don't want that. They don't know how to love or be loved. And a lot of women who do get sort of left by the wayside because of that. So that's where this imbalance happens between men and women, that the men who want to get married generally can, and the women, as you get older, have fewer, I would say, eligible, meaning people that you want to be with, men in their dating pool.
Makes complete sense. This one made me laugh. Happily married people believe their partners are better than the average person. It's called positive illusions,
yes.
Even though that's statistically impossible.
Yes, and I love this because this is, again, going back to when people say, oh, I wish, when they're dating, oh, I wish he was more this, or I wish she was more this, whatever it is. When you are with someone, you actually think that that person is better looking than they, maybe actually are, that their personality is better than it actually is, that they're funnier, smarter, more charming, more delightful than the average person. And that's just not true, because look at your friends' husbands, for example. There are a lot of them where you might think, oh, I understand why they're together, but also I don't think that person is as wonderful as obviously she does, right? Or you just just wait in line somewhere, wait in line for at Starbucks or something, right? And you look at the couples who are together and you might think, oh, they think they're amazing. Each of them, but that person wouldn't be for me.
Yeah, it's so true. But I think I assume that helps them with the relationship, where you're looking at that person,
yes,
like they're the apple of your eye.
Well, we do that too. We aren't as fabulous as we think we are, but our partner thinks that. And that's great. And we think that our partner isn't as fabulous. If you just surveyed 100 people, might not be as fabulous, right? But we think they're a 10 on all these things, right? We think they're great.
Yeah, I think I scored an 11 with my hubby.
There you go.
So. Stay-at-home wives are more satisfied with their husbands than working wives. That shocked me.
That's so interesting. I mean, I would have to this would be a wild guess on that one because that's new to me. I think that might be because of the ones who are working are not getting the support that they need from their partners.
Oh.
So it's I'm doing this job that I love, but the problem is I'm not getting the support at home. Because if you think about it, when men work, it's assumed that there's someone at home taking care of all of these other things. It's not assumed that, for women, it's oh, but they're also having to take care of all these other things.
70% of new couples will break up within the first year.
Yeah, as they should. right? Because this is why do you want to spend, this is what we were talking about, sunk cost. So many people come to me and they'll say, you know, we've been together for 5 years and I don't know if we're right for each other. It's like, what are you doing? Right? Why now 5 years? Like that first you go through 4 seasons with someone. What is it like going through 4 seasons with someone? See what that's like. And if it's not really happening in those 4 seasons, why are you going to waste more time with that person?
That's interesting. I never considered that the 4 seasons have so many different dynamics, right? So it's like you see how they are at Christmas, you see how they are at Thanksgiving, you see how they are on your birthday and the summer vacation. That's so true. That's interesting. I actually, when I read that, it was a little heartbreaking for me, but now I've changed my mind. It's way more empowering.
I think it makes it's actually a very smart way to date.
Yeah, actually makes complete sense. Kind of goes back to something we'd said earlier, but divorce rates for women who have lived with more than one man were twice as high as those who haven't.
Right, and I think that goes back to the you can return it, the living together. Some of these statistics sound horrifying, but they're actually not. Like, I think that that's so positive that 70% of people say, oh, you know what, we spent a year together, it's not right. And 30% of people, let's look at the other side, said, oh, wow, this is going really well, let's keep going. So that's great, because maybe that's their person. But for those 70% where it's not their person, why should they waste more of their time?
So why do we then? So let's say we've gone through the 4 seasons with somebody. So often, and I understand that it can be multiple things like social pressure and things like that. But I know a few people that knew after the first year and then they stayed with that person for 5 years and they get married and then it's almost like as soon as they get married, they realize their mistake and then they divorce and they leave them. What's happening there where you just settle and then let's say you then make a very major commitment in front of your family. I'm Greek Orthodox, so it's a Greek, it's massive wedding, but then within the year, they then get divorced.
Yes. I would say it's because hope is not a strategy. And what I mean by that is that before they get married, their strategy is hope. It'll get better, it'll get better, it'll get better. It's okay that I don't have this or, you know, whatever they are feeling ambivalent about. And then they get married and now hope is no longer a strategy for them. Because now it's like, oh, hope didn't work. He's still the same person, I'm still the same person, we're still unhappy in the same ways.
Okay, so what about, I'm just gonna throw other scenarios because I hear this often and it really breaks my heart. And so I'm trying to find ways that anyone listening that may think like this can start to pivot a little. But like, I don't know if you do know women who, or I know a few women who have thought that having a baby meant that the guy was gonna stay and be the perfect partner.
Yeah, again, hope is not a strategy. I think so many people think that, you know, the very thing that will create more stress in their lives is going to bring them more ease. And it's you know, like a Hail Mary, but it's so heartbreaking, as you said. It's heartbreaking for the child, first and foremost, and it's heartbreaking for the couple. You know, and I think that the reason people do that is because they didn't actually go and get help to see whether they are, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, who knows. But they didn't go to see. And so before you start having children, you really need to know, are we right together? Because we will be parenting this child forever.
Yeah, like the idea that, like, it breaks my heart that any woman feels like that they have to be with somebody that isn't right for them or that doesn't want them or like deserve them. Like, I want every woman to feel their worth and find someone that does deserve them versus you always stretching yourself to please other people. And yeah, that's definitely a wish of mine that I hope other women are able to do.
Right, but sometimes people are just not compatible. Like, they're compatible in certain ways, but they're not compatible to go through life together. And they hold on to the part that's compatible, and then they think, well, I've invested 3 years already into this, so I don't want to start over. But those are years. If you leave now, you have more chance of finding the person that is compatible than wasting more years with this person who's not.
How much do we mistake compatibility with being like you?
So many times people say, oh, I want them to have all the same interests that I do. And it's kind of like, really? Like, what are you going to talk about if they don't bring something different also? I mean, you have to have some overlap in the Venn diagram, you know, and it might not be a specific interest. Like, so many people say, like, I want him to like reading in the way that I like reading. And maybe he likes reading nonfiction and you like novels. That's okay. Maybe he likes reading the New York Times instead, you know, like, maybe he likes storytelling through television series. You don't have to share every single interest. You know, he might like, sports in a way that you don't. That's okay. That's good. That's healthy. So you don't want to date your clone. You don't want to date someone who's exactly like you. You want someone to bring something a little bit different enough, but not so different that you don't have similar senses of humor, or you don't find similar things funny, or you don't see the world in a certain way that will cause a lot of problems, right? There's so many people who say, oh, it's okay that this person thinks something wildly different from me, but then I would want to know why. You know, like, what led you to believe this? What led you to think in this way? That's really important because the why might not be compatible for you.
And it feels like we focus on those types of things from like hobbies and things like that as being, oh, that means that I'm compatible. And it wasn't until I met my husband where his music was the complete opposite to the music that I like. The way that my fashion sense is completely different to he doesn't even care what he wears. So it's like, on the surface, I always say, if I wasn't a dating app, I never would have gone on a date with him.
And that's why, so in my book, we talk about how much detail you should put in your profile for dating apps. Because when they say things like, I like music, the other person might think, oh, I like music, great. And you'll click on them, right? But if you put specifically what music you like, and they're like, oh, I don't like that at all, you probably won't swipe on them. I mean, it's ridiculous, the things that people rule people out for. And so the less specific you can be, the better, because people think that you have to be so aligned on these, you know, small things, like, you know, the particular types of music that you like, which is nice, but there might be other things that you aligned on so perfectly that it doesn't matter that you like different kinds of music.
But I assume things like your values and your morals and your like things like that have to somewhat be aligned, because that's the sort of thing that really dictates how you handle conflicts and things like that.
Yes. And even how you handle conflict is something you need to align on. Like if you're both very avoidant, that's going to be a problem. If you're both very communicative, in a respectful way, that's going to be very important. And also coming from a family that feels intact. I don't mean intact whether they're divorced or not divorced. I mean like emotionally intact, that you somehow have learned something from that family and can be in relationship with them if they're not harmful to you. I think is really important. There are people where you meet them and they're like, I don't talk to anybody in my family. Maybe they needed to, so that might be valid. But sometimes it's like, what happened there, right? So you want to know, like, how are their relationships, not just with their family, but do they have friends? Do they have long-term friends? Do they have a community around them? Something is wrong if they can't be in relationship in other contexts.
What about even their relationships in the context of romance? So asking your partner or the person you're dating about their past.
Yeah.
How much of that showcases who they really are? Or I can't remember who said it, but it was like they always have their own representative. So everything they tell you isn't actually 100% true.
So I think it was that old Chris Rock joke that for the first 3 months of a relationship, you're not you, you're the ambassador of you.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and also we're all unreliable narrators and we want the person to like us. So we're going to leave in certain details. We're not necessarily going to say the thing that would reflect badly on us that went wrong in the relationship. And so everything they're saying might be absolutely true, meaning everything they're telling you about what the other person did might be absolutely true, but they're not telling you everything that they did, right? So you're only getting part of the story. I think that the relationship history is important in the sense of, have they had relationships, right? Like, what do they know about doing this thing that you're going to be doing with them? But also, what did they learn from those relationships? It's not so much, if they're able to say, you know what, I made a big mistake in that relationship, or I was really avoidant in that relationship, and I've learned now that I need to communicate more. That's a big green flag. So it doesn't matter that you didn't do it well before. It matters that you've learned something that you want to do differently now. If you go on a date with someone or you're dating someone and they say, oh, my partner, she was crazy. So many men say that about women. She was crazy. She was like a nutcase. It's like, well, what made you pick her? Okay? Because maybe she wasn't so much of a nutcase, or maybe you're just talking about all the ways in which you provoked her. And so what were you doing, right? What was your role in this? And why did you stay with her for 3 years? Well, I didn't how did you not realize that? So I'd get really curious about that. Or so many divorced men will say like, oh, my ex-wife, so crazy. Well, when you had an affair on her, yeah, maybe she freaked out.
Yeah. He's saying like she just kept freaking out. Well, yeah, you slept with people behind her back.
I just, whatever those things are, like, again, the dance, 2 people are in this. So what I would want to know about someone's relationship history is, and not interviewing them. You never want to interview someone, but it's just organic. You hear things like, well, what happened, or why did you break up, or what was good about that relationship? That's a question I would always want to ask. What worked? You want to hear them say that there was something good there, or else why were they there?
That's such a great question to ask.
Yeah. And you want to hear them also be able to say positive things about their ex. That it can't be all, they were bad, I was good. It has to be like, we both were responsible for this. She's a really interesting person. I did this that triggered her. She did this that triggered me. We didn't know how to do this together. We weren't right together, but she's a great person. That's the kind of thing you want to be hearing.
Yeah, my brother actually is friends with all of his exes. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's such a good sign. Because
I do too. Yeah, and people get so threatened by that. And it's like, they're not together for a reason. And if you trust your partner, they should be able to have whatever friends they want to have. This is about a trust issue that you have. If you can't understand why he is friends with this person and chose, whether that person, whoever chose, they're not in a relationship together and he's choosing to be with you. Now, there need to be boundaries around that. Like, maybe you're like, you know what, I'm not really comfortable with you guys going overnight somewhere together. Okay. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But, okay, there are some boundaries that you guys choose together. But to be friends, to go to lunch with, to have conversations with, I think that's a great sign.
I think if you are a jealous person because maybe you've been wounded and someone's abused that in the past, and so you have that eye for, oh, I've been backstabbed before, I'm going to have my eye, really close on that person. I get it. But there is that, in seeing my brother specifically be friends with his ex, it's not like he meets them all the time, right. But it goes to show there's so much respect there.
Yeah.
And when they broke up, he wasn't, a cruel person. He was exactly who he was. He was kind. He was respectful. They had a good friendship. They were able to maintain that friendship. And so I always wondered, and thinking through how, if a guy is still talking to their ex, how someone can perceive that as such a bad thing and a big red flag. But actually, when you really know the person, it can be actually a sign, like you said, a big green flag, that actually they're a good person and they've never cheated on their partner and they've always left amicably.
Anything that somebody says about their ex, they will probably say about you if you break up. So keep that in mind. So if they are really positive about their ex, and if you happen to break up, they'll probably be very positive about you. Think about that. They say the past doesn't predict the future. Oh, yes, it does. Like, you can't, in this way. So this is, if your partner has never cheated on anyone, that's a good prediction, right?
Yeah.
The past does predict the future. If, however, your former partner cheated on you, and then you say to your new partner, oh, I don't like you having lunch with this person, or I don't like you having female friends, or whatever it is, or where were you? Why didn't you call me? What happened? You're punishing your current partner for a crime they didn't commit. They never cheated on you. They haven't cheated at all. Your other partner cheated on you, and you're treating this person like they need to be under house arrest for a crime they didn't commit. So the past does predict the future, meaning your partner hasn't cheated. That's good. The other one did. that you don't have to worry about that. You're not in relationship with that person. But if you keep acting like you're dating someone from the past, you're going to drive away your current partner, because your current partner is not going to tolerate being treated like he did something wrong when he didn't.
What if then your current partner did cheat on in their past relationship?
I would proceed with caution. I would want to know what the circumstances were, and remember, they're giving their version of it. If their version is, I was really unhappy, well, that's not a great answer. If their version is, I was really unhappy, I didn't know how to talk about it, I feel terrible, it was completely my fault, I would never do that again. If I'm ever unhappy again in a relationship, I am not going to go find another partner, I'm going to talk about it. Well, okay, I'm still going to be cautious, but I'm going to be more open to that person. And I'm going to see, how do they talk to me about things? I also want to know, how many times have they cheated in the past? What was the, have they cheated with more than one girlfriend or more than one partner? How long did it go on? What did it feel like for them when you were doing it? How did it feel? If they say, oh, it was great because I got away from my unhappy, depressed wife. Well, that's not what I want to hear. I might want to hear, on the one hand, it was a relief. On the other hand, I felt terribly guilty the whole time. And I was juggling these two lives, and I could never live that way again. So I want to hear how they think about it.
Also, I think a big part of it is like, what have you done since to correct?
Yeah, I'd want to know that they've done something about, like, have you gone to therapy? Have you talked about this? What have you learned about this?
Yeah. Lori, I literally could sit here and just keep asking you questions. I've had so much fun. Where can people find you and all the amazing work that you're doing and all the books you're putting out and everything?
They can find me at lorigottlieb.com. They can find me on social media. You can find all that on my website, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, LinkedIn. They can read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. We're actually making a TV series of Maybe You Should Talk to Someone.
Congratulations.
Kristen Bell is playing me, which I'm very happy about.
God, that's huge.
Yes. So look for Kristen Bell as your new therapist on TV.
That's amazing.
And Maybe You Should Talk to Someone workbook. There's a journal. They can read my Dear Therapist column in The Atlantic. They can listen to the Dear Therapist podcast, where they can hear actual sessions with people. And they can listen to our conversation today.
If you want to learn how to make your relationship last with 94% accuracy, guys, then click here right now. By watching couples, you can predict with 94% accuracy if they're going to stay together 6 years down the road or if they're going to break up. What sign?